Okay, one last video and we'll turn this into a game. So we are very slowly building our way up to a set of scripts and objects that we can piece together into a nice simple game. And that game is going to involve this sphere that we've just done the physics for, avoiding a set of hazards to navigate its way to a goal. And what we're going to work on now is a few of those hazards. We're going to make reusable objects known as prefabs that we can store in this project panel and quickly drag and drop into our level for the sake of making the challenge. So the first hazard is going to consist of a sphere. So I'm going to make a 3D sphere, move my sphere over here, and just focus on it so we can work on it on its own. I'm then going to add a cylinder to it. So I'm going to take a 3D object, cylinder, and I'm going to drag it into that sphere, and then just to make sure it's centered, reset any transform that was applied to it. Then rotate it 90 degrees in the Z, and we're going to scale it down. So with the scale tool, scale it down so it sort of fits inside the sphere, and then scale it up in the Y-axis so that it pokes out. And this is going to rotate as a hazard. But for now, that's enough. That's enough visual stuff that we can assume that's going to be our object. So we're now going to turn this into a prefab. And a prefab is a template object that you can reuse, quickly drag and drop out of the project panel into your scene to make levels. And to actually make the prefab, you just drag an object that you want to keep a reference to into your project panel. But before I do it, I'm just going to go back to my asset root, right click, and create a folder for them. So I'm going to make a prefabs folder. And then I'm going to drag this object from the hierarchy into that prefabs folder. And you can see that we get this little preview of it. So I've now got this sphere 1 prefab that I'm going to rename. Let's call it hazard 1. And we can drag and drop to have multiple hazard 1s. So far so good. But that's not the end of it. It's not a finalised done deal once you've put it into your project panel. You can continuously update it. So these hazards need to do something a bit more intricate. So I'm going to pick the original one, navigate to the scripts folder, and I'm going to take this auto rotate script that we made, and I'm going to drop it onto the main object, the sphere. I'll then give it some information so that we've done the code for this a few videos ago, hopefully you remember it, but it rotates automatically, and I'm going to give it some Y rotation. I'm going to tell it to rotate 2 degrees every frame in the Y-axis, and then just hit play to see what happens. And you can see that the first one that I made is now rotating, but the others aren't. And that's because we've not propagated that change out to all of the prefabs. And we can do that by selecting the object we just applied the component to and navigating to the top of the inspector, and you can see that it's slightly different now. We've got this prefab option. It's acknowledged that it's a prefab, and we can hit apply to apply any changes to other instances of that prefab. If we hit play now, you can see that all 3 of those prefabs rotate, which is quite good. It's not the only place you can change it as well. We can actually go to the prefab itself in the project panel, select it and make changes there. So I could maybe up the rotation to 20 and hit play. And now they're spinning very fast, far too fast to dodge. So we will actually change that. Maybe do it 1 degree. Nice and slow, they're the easy hazards. And you're going to have to time the roll of the ball to get past them. And oh, I got hit. I'm still getting hit. But yeah, you get the idea. But we could very quickly and easily populate a level with those. Just to make them stand out as hazards, I want to give them some colour. And we're not going to do this in code this time. We're going to do it the more straightforward way. In the assets folder, I'm now going to make another folder called materials. I missed the button. Materials. And in there, I'm going to right click, create material. And let's call this hazard. So my hazards are all going to share a material. A material, if you're into your 3D modelling and stuff, will eventually be your textures and so on for the models that you import. but for now I'm just going to use a solid colour. So up where it says albedo, you might know that as the diffuse for your model. You could drag a texture in there that you've made, but I'm just going to change the colour. So instead of being white, we're going to go with a hazardous red colour. I'm then going to drag that material to one of my prefabs, to both objects in that prefab. Select the main one and hit apply to apply it to all of them, and you can see they all update. So that was relatively painless, and those prefabs are now always going to be red, and we'll be able to clearly see them once we're playing the game. The next step is that these prefabs need to be tagged so that we know they're hazards. When we come to code the game up, we need to know that these are hazards. So I'm going to assign a tag to each of the objects in this prefab. So I'm going to select the sphere, then I'm going to hold shift and select the cylinder as well. So I've got both of them selected. And you can see in the inspector here that we have this tag option. And by default, objects are untagged. We want to tag these as enemies so that we know we've got a group of objects that are all common, and we know that if we ever bump into one of them, we lose. So I'm going to click on that tag option and notice that there isn't currently a tag for enemies. So I'm going to add one down at the bottom, click add tag, and that will update your inspector and take you to this tags list, and we just want to add one to it. So I'm going to click the plus button and then make an enemy tag. Easy. Then with both of those selected again, I've deselected them. With both of those objects selected, let's tag them as enemy. So they're both tagged as enemy now. And we can use that in the script. And what I'm going to do is make it so that when the player, the sphere, bumps into an enemy, the level reloads. And let's do that now. So this is a handy little bit of code that we're going to take forward into the game. So I'm going to load up that sphere controller, and we're going to make use of the on collision enter that we used earlier. So on collision enter, and then in brackets it worked with a collision object that we called other, so I'll stick with that. And here's where we want to check that the object we bumped into was actually a hazard. Otherwise we'll just die when we hit anything. So we're going to use an if. We've done an if before. We're going to ask a question, and the question is going to be if other dot GameObject dot compare tag, and then in brackets we put the tag. So if it's an enemy, we want to do something, and in here this is where we will reload the level. So we're going to actually regenerate the level that they just clashed into a hazard on. And to do that we use application dot load level, and then in brackets we tell it which level, and we just want to reload the one we're already on, so we can just ask the application again to use the loaded level, and that should do it. So on collision enter, check the tag of the other object. If it's an enemy, reload the current level. So let's give that a try. Make sure it's saved. And let's roll that sphere into one of these hazards, and bam. It's reloaded. It looks hideous. There's a little bit of a bug when you're inside the editor that the lighting doesn't quite calculate once you've regenerated the scene for whatever reason. But that won't happen when we come to build the game. When we actually export the game, this will be fine. And the hazard stopped working. That's a bit odd. No, worked the second time around though. Is it struggling to load the level possibly? Or maybe I didn't tag, oh, did I not change the other, yeah, okay, my bad. I didn't update the other prefabs, so I need to press apply there. And hopefully they're all tagged as enemies now, yeah. I must have fluked it the first time and actually hit the second one. But now any of them should kill us. That's it. Just make sure you do apply any changes to prefabs if you need them. That's pretty much it for this video. We are actually set to make a game now. Obviously I'll cover any extra tiny little bits in the game video itself. But yeah, let's make stuff.